Hello and welcome to another episode of Africa's Critical Thinkers. On this episode, Nokwazi shares her journey from corporate to entrepreneurship, as well as key issues entrepreneurs in South Africa are facing.
Just to kick off, firstly, maybe for you to give some context as to where you're from, your family structure, like schooling, just a bit of background.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Nokwazi Mzobe. I am based in Johannesburg. I think I've lived here on and off for the last 16 years. But I'm originally from KZN, so a proud KZNer. When people ask me where home is, I still say home is Durban, home is KZN. Even though, I've been here for quite a while. I went to school in Eshowe. So primary school was in a small town in KZN called Eshowe. It's quite interesting because it was a convent school. And it was actually one of the first multiracial schools in the country. So imagine in the in the late 80s, living in apartheid states, but you're in a multiracial school, and it's just my brother and I always chat about the dynamics of that. High school, I ended up in Pietermaritzburg at an all-girls school, so that was also quite interesting. So I was at St. John's. It was a small little private school. I think also what's quite interesting about there is that, being the scholarship kid, because, I got a good scholarship to be able to attend there, and also being, one of two Black girls in the class.
So you're just an overachiever from birth, Jay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was high school, and then ended up at UKZN. Actually, my mother didn't send my application forms to any other university. She was like, "You've been in boarding school all your life. You need to come stay home." I think it was a good thing because you know what it's like when you've been in boarding school and also English medium boarding schools. You end up not speaking your language properly. And whereas during that time, our African languages weren't taught in these schools. So my mom was just like, I can't have a child who can't even speak her own language properly. So I was at UKZN. I studied a Bachelor of Science in cell biology. So I'm a scientist by background. So cell biology,
wow.
and organic chem. And then I hated organic chem. So second year, I swapped it out and I added on psychology as my second major. So I did that, and I ended up choosing to do my honors in psychology. And I ended up at Wits because I got a Wits scholarship. So I did my honors at Wits, and that's how I actually ended up in Johannesburg. And so that, and then how these corporates come in and recruit on campus. So through campus recruitment, I got recruited by Procter and Gamble and ended up in logistics. So I started off my career in logistics as an inbound, outbound planner, which is basically somebody who works with containers. So that's how my career started. I hated it. It was boring.
From scientist to shipping container logistics person.
I know.
It's a bit of a jump. Yeah, it's a bit of an extreme jump.
It was an extreme jump. Thank goodness I had the kind of boss who was just like, "You've got such an analytical mind. This is not the role for you." So I only lasted in that role for 3 months. And then at the time, they didn't have a forecasting department. So they started a demand forecasting department. and this other lady and myself, we were the two people who kind of got it up and running. So I became an analyst, a demand forecaster. Did that, which then got integrated with supply. So then I became what was called a market planner. Basically, you do everything from demand to working all the way with the factories and bringing the stock in. So it was quite holistic. So I did that for a number of brands, for colorants, for hair care, for Gillette. And I think it was a really great experience because it was the one role where you actually got to understand every aspect of the business. Because as a demand planner, you had to sit with the marketing team. So you needed to know what's happening out there. You had to sit with the sales team. You needed to know what's happening on shelf and in the warehouse. You had to sit with the planners, with the factory. We were part of bringing products to market. So you would be part of the launch team. So, and reporting to finance as well. So it was a role that I think, made me a really strong business person, and now that I look back at it, because I had to understand every part of the business, even with R&D, even to the point of are the label, the content on the label, is it correct? Because I had one situation where we launched a new hair care product, not launched but upgraded it, and we had finished all the stock in South Africa. We're bringing in this new product and it gets to port in Bournemouth in the UK and it can't be shipped. And it was the smallest thing, KG. It was the fact that on the label, there was alcohol and there was and some oxygen something. And basically that's inflammable in a container. Wow. And that couldn't be. So when the authorities on that side saw this, they were just like, this can't go into the container. And imagine now we have no stock in the country and we now need to find a solution to get all this brand new stock, because we also can't destroy it into South Africa. So, that just gives you context of the type of work I had to do, because then we were R&D team and to understand and how do we solve this problem at the same time, having to search for different product from other markets to at least bring into the country until we could solve the solution of bringing in this new product. So that's just an example of how my career started. And then I was with them for 5 years. I was in more, because that falls under supply chain logistics. Then I moved to marketing, and I was in marketing for about 8 months before I left and went to Nokia. And Nokia, I was hired as a still a demand planner, but a financial planner.
3310.
The best phone ever. So I was doing a similar job, but now it was pure finance. And it was a very different structure because now I was actually working across at the time, Sub-Saharan Africa. And then they merged Sub-Sahara and the Middle East. And so then I worked as the financial demand planner for Middle East and Africa, which was great because I was in meetings with all the GMs and the head of sales to understand how sales are going, to be able to, again, take the forecasting, feed it back to the logistics team, and also feed it back to the global teams. So it really, I think that role gave me kind of C-suite experience, if I put it in that sense. I always say, like in my first 3 months, I got to meet the CFO of a multinational and have a discussion with him, which was great. And then I ended up in Kenya. So I became the head of finance, so financial controller for East and Southern Africa. And I looked after 8 markets in East Africa, East and Central. and a bit of West, because I think Angola was also part of that market, the market cluster. And I was there for almost 3 years before I decided to put my hat in the ring and step out and went and did my MBA in the US. US and then 3 months in China. And then I decided to backpack. I just felt like I wasn't ready to go back to work. I couldn't get myself to go back to work. So I backpacked for about 6, 7 months. And then I got back to SA, did nothing for 3 months, literally just slept. And then my mom, the one day, she's like, just go register a business. Just go register something. And I'm like, but I don't know. I was like, I don't know what I want to
Because she
do.
didn't want you spending her money. She didn't want you spending her
Yes.
money. She was like, no, you can't be back here. You're spending my money. So
And you know what's crazy is that my family was really worried because I was the focused one, right? I mean, I was the scientist, I was this, I got the scholarships and there. Then first time in my life, I just am doing nothing and have no ambition. So so yeah, I remember going to like I think Cedar when it was still kind of building itself up to a Cedar office in Durban. And yeah, my mom took me there, and that's where I registered for Matoyana. And at the time, I did not know what the hell I was going to do, but I registered this business.
how did you pick the name though?
And
Like, how did the name come about?
so Toyana is Tagazelo, right? So for those who don't know Zulu, it's a family name, it's a clan name. And so my mom always calls me Matoyana.
Okay.
Yes. And so when we couldn't, so we wanted to call it Toyana, and the name was already taken. And so we just put in the MA. And then they got the spelling wrong because they removed the H. So
Okay.
when a Zulu person sees the name, they say Matoyana because and then then I have to say it's Matoyana. And then you have to, this is
Okay.
the whole like things like okay, people think that I don't know how to spell my
They were
my
doing
own
you a
language.
favor and they corrected it for you.
Yes. So yeah, so that's how I got the name. And really that in a sense, left Durban, went back to Joburg, and I saw a program that had actually been mentioned in my entrepreneurship class during my MBA. So Goldman Sachs had started a 10,000 woman program around the world to support female business owners. And one day, scrolling online, and I see that Gibbs is starting this 10,000 woman program and is looking for volunteers. So I reached out to them and offered to be a volunteer mentor. And interestingly, that's kind of how my journey as a business owner started because I mean, I volunteered with them, which is now called the Entrepreneurship Academy. At the time, it was still literally just the Gibbs 10,000 Women program. And I started off as a volunteer mentor, and then they kind of started to take it a bit more seriously. And I became like more of a regular mentor. And then some of the students or the businesswomen who I had mentored actually went and lobbied and said, hey, um, we feel like she understands us. And I think we think she should be part of the faculty. Um, and so I was given an opportunity to do a few free trainings or facilitations. And based on the feedback that I had received, then I became a part-time facilitator. Um, and 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 then also at the same time, some of these women reached out to me when they finished their program, and they wanted me to consult. And kind of that's how it started, KG. I started off by, at the time, I used to position myself as a McKinsey to small business.
Yeah.
uh, but and then I understood why there are not a lot of consultants to small businesses because they can't pay. To give you perspective, I mean, I used to charge as little as 200 Rand for
Yeah.
like an hour consultation, which was way below market rates, and totally not sustainable. And so I had to pivot my business model very quickly. And I think the policy around BEE kind of helped with that, because now I could kind of shift to a more third party model because they still need
Yeah.
help. So the small businesses still needed the help. And so I started getting more corporate clients who wanted me to work with the small businesses. And that's and
Yeah.
that's
But I mean,
kind of how, yeah.
sorry, I was going to say, as a someone that's consulted for small businesses, you um, obviously that gave you a lot of perspective on what a lot of people struggled with when they started a business. So not I mean, for example, myself, when I started a business, I didn't think to even go to consultant. I was like, I'm just going to do this thing,
Yes.
but I could have saved myself probably a lot of time and headache and pain if I had seen a consultant. So what are maybe some of the things that you saw was like a trend with people that were new to business?
Um, so I mean, I can even use myself because it's a similar thing. Is that one is that you don't know what you don't know, and so you need to reach out to people early, people in different spaces, so that you don't waste a lot of time and money. And I think, we like to start off as mavericks and think we have this great idea and then we
Yeah,
can do it ourselves, right? And yes, we do have a great idea, but the reality that if you don't know finance well, if you don't know someone in a certain industry, it's going to take you a whole lot of time to be able to have those doors open for you. So I think for me, that's the one thing, is that people don't really sit down and say, okay, in order for me to do this, like, what do I need? And then who can help me get there?
yeah,
And to think critically as well. So I think for me, that's the one thing that I've noticed. I think the other one is that people really do hold themselves back because of money. So a lot of people will say, I don't
yeah,
have the money. And
yeah,
what they don't realize is that everything, if there's an asset around you, that's money. And KG, like, your experience in corporate, there's value to that, and somebody needs that. So
yeah,
I think for me, that's the other thing, specifically with startups. When people have just said, I don't have money, my thing, my business is not making money yet, and stuff like that. I'm like, well, look for alternative ways to bring in the money whilst you're building this. And I think you
yeah,
find a lot of people who just walk away because and I think there's also just the wrong expectation that
yeah,
funding out there is going to help you start up. Very few people give money to a startup, right?
but I
Very few
think
people.
I think the issue, or not the issue, but um, the problem that is, or the way startups are publicized or romanticized in the media, are that you look at the Steve Jobs, you look at Bill Gates, you look at all these big startups, which are now multinational companies. You kind of don't see, you don't hear the story about the before. You hear the story about
Yes.
when they blew up. You know, and you're seeing a lot of people on social media, for example, that are romanticizing the idea of being an entrepreneur. They're like, they drive a fancy car, they're always going out, eating at great places, but they're not necessarily really telling the truth as to the struggle of it.
Yeah.
Just as you said, with regards to money, when it comes to money, um, a lot of people, and with some people that I've spoken to, for this podcast, what I've realized is a lot of entrepreneurs actually technically have more than one business. They have a business
Mm.
that they're really passionate about, and there's something else that they're doing that's actually making them money. They're
Yes.
using the skills that they currently possess to make them money. So I think a lot of people maybe, get married to this, just to this one idea and in some cases to their detriment, because
Yeah.
there isn't another form of a revenue stream coming into their business or into their life.
I agree. And that's why for me, again, when I've worked with startups, I'm just like, just take out that garage story, right? We're in South Africa. The majority of you in front of me are black. You don't have a
Yeah.
parent's garage to go live in. And,
Yeah.
so you've got to cover that cost. I mean, for me, I was writing papers for the HSRC. I wrote papers for some professors at UKZN, 30, 40 page papers for 3,000 Rand. I mean, now I realize people like charge 10,000, 20,000 Rand for that, but that's how I made money on the side whilst I was building. So I think, yeah, we've got to bust that myth. Because I think the rhetoric and the discussion in the entrepreneurship space needs to change. In the sense of people, I keep hearing people saying that access to funding. No, build something, even if it's a prototype, and be able to show that you can build it, and then somebody is willing to invest in you. So for me, that's really one of the things. The other thing, KG, is that what I can say is that what really gave me an advantage was my experience in corporate.
Yeah.
So, I understand that we're in a country where unemployment is really high, and so we're encouraging people to start businesses off the bat. But there is value in having that corporate experience, in just learning the ins and outs of how to manage people, learning the different tools and technologies, because you take that knowledge with you. And you build up systems and processes properly. And for me, some of the early things, and I remember some of the things I consulted on, because I worked a lot with creative businesses as well, is that they had no structure. And actually, my first longest client, so I was with them for 14 months, and they were a creative agency. And I helped them put systems and processes together in the business. And things like you need to have proper contracts for your staff. You need to invest in having an accountant, and know that an accountant is not free. Like, if it's cheap, then you will have cheap financials.
You get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for. One of the biggest lessons that I also learned was that having a lawyer is important. And again, same thing. Cheap lawyer, you get what you pay for. So small things like that is that I think a lot of people need to understand is that you've got to pay. You've got to pay to get good service and to get good advice. And you need to be willing to pay for that. Yes, there are things that you can kind of cut corners, right? But I think for me, the places where I've lost a whole lot of money is when I've cut corners. And my older brother always says, Knox, when are you going to learn? Cheap is going to cost you more in the long run. So I think for me, that's also the other thing in terms of that. And I think the last one is that I think it's changing now, but initially just had people starting businesses that was similar to someone else because somebody else was doing it and they were making money. So now I'm going to do it. And without really just, putting in the hard work, doing the analysis, where is there a market? And for me in the early days, the amount of just similar businesses that I saw was quite depressing, because I think people just say there's an opportunity here and this is what I'm going to do. And they started and they fail and they don't. And that's because they just didn't put in the work to understand if there was really an opportunity and if this was something that they would be able to do and bring to life and grow it. Yeah.
I mean, you see it a lot in on the African continent in like in secondary markets, I'll call them, you know, like in a township market, you find someone that has a spaza shop, and 4 houses away, not even 4 streets, 4 houses away, there's also another spaza shop, and they're not necessarily selling something different, they're selling the same things. And
Yes.
it's, you know, I think it's not but I agree with you. I guess you are seeing people move out of that now and more moving into trying to differentiate themselves. But I think there needs to be more of that. You know, like in my mind, if everyone is selling potatoes, you should have a some sort of a cooperative where you're like, okay,
Yes.
clearly we all have potatoes, but let's actually all form one solid company where, as a group, we are more stronger as a group, and you know, revenues are shared amongst everyone, so everyone is looked
Yes.
after. There isn't like this turf war, like, you know, you're in the drug narcos gang where you're selling on my street.
You know? and and you know the other thing, KG, so this is gonna sound a bit controversial, okay? But the other thing that's really pissed me off is this whole ESD space. And I know I've been a player in the space because that's the marketized service, right? But the
Yeah,
longer that I've been there, is that what I find is that everybody wants to work with the corporate. So we all want to go work with the big corporate. We want to get the big corporate contract. But then now each corporate you go work for tells you that you need to go through some ESD program.
yeah,
And before you can become a supplier or vendor. And then I just look at the number of Black businesses that are now attending multiple ESD programs
yeah,
uh, in order to get into the supply chain of a corporate. And most of the time, they don't even get in
yeah,
and don't even get the work. And then, you know, I remember I just stopped and when I started seeing multiple people in some of the programs that I was either facilitating on or maybe even doing, I just started asking myself, yes, I believe you need to educate yourself as an entrepreneur, but you've got to stop and ask yourself, does this make sense?
yeah,
Because now you're not working on your business anymore. You're sitting in class most of the time
exactly. Yeah,
so that you can
yeah,
get one contract. So for me, that's the other thing, and I think it's mainly Black businesses. It's got to say to people, you've got to stop and say, is this the only way I can get in? I can get business. And
yeah,
that's the other place where I've seen people getting discouraged because they're like, if I get that big corporate, then I'll be fine. Versus actually search for the smaller businesses
yeah,
and try to get into them and have a multiple number of them who are your clients, then trying to get into an SAB or a Transnet and think if I get this one, then I'll be made. And so for me, that's also a thinking that just needs to be changed. And I think maybe it's the structure of our economy with
yeah,
mainly monopolies and oligopolies and that having to fundamentally change. But I think for me that's really just one of the things. And the other one is to be okay to subcontract, right? I think to as you're starting off and you need to build up your skills, right? Subcontract to the guy who's got the big corporate contract so that you understand how these guys work. So for me, these were some of the things that I've observed, and I'm just like, so in the same way that we spoke about the spaza shop, right? Just
yeah,
ask yourself how many Black cleaning companies, how many Black catering companies, or digital agencies, or eventing companies, or gifting, or it's just like it, they become so many of us in one category,
yeah,
and but you can only service so many organizations.
yeah. But
So
I
for
guess
me,
it's a structural issue, right? Like I think if it's a maybe it's a lack of skill set. So they would predominantly all kind of do the same things because they don't possess skills outside of that. You know, they're not going to be tech startups because from a background and an education perspective or just how they've been socialized, it's not in a way where technology is like at the forefront of their minds, you know. So you might find with the new generation of people uh, coming up and getting a little bit older, those businesses might actually morph into something different, because they, they've gone to school, they've been socialized in different environments, they have traveled. Because, I mean, for someone like yourself, someone that's traveled to all these different countries and continents, you've got almost an understanding of what a first world country, for example, first world transport in a first world country, what it operates like. So when you come to South Africa and you see the transport system here, you're like, there's so much potential here. It could be so much better. As opposed to someone that's grown up here, that sees the transport system and says, this is great, I am happy, until they go to London and they see the train, the train network in London, the underground train network, so I think it has to do with a lot of that structured, just from a structure perspective. The older generations haven't necessarily experienced, have had different experiences or enough experiences for them to think outside the box. They see someone else doing this and it's easier for them to do.
And I agree. And that's why I'm pointing it out in a sense that if you're calling yourself an entrepreneur, you've got to step out and think differently. And just say, how can I do this differently, rather than following the way that it's done, And for me, that's what I'm really advocating for, is for people to think differently. Because where I slightly disagree with you, all the people that you're talking about are all educated. So most of the people who I interacted with went to varsity, worked for good organizations. And when they saw that there was an opportunity to become a supplier, I think maybe that's where the problem is. It becomes that there's an opportunity to become a supplier. So that's when I'm going to leave and start a business so that I can supply this, versus saying, okay, am I really starting a business and solving a problem that could potentially become something else? And I agree with you. It also is systemic, because that was the opportunity given to Black business before, to say that now that we have BEE, right, here's an opportunity to supply us with paper. Here's an opportunity to supply us with this type of service. And hence, you just got a whole lot of people kind of shifting over there. And I agree with you. Like what you and Ayanda are doing, right? It's innovative. It's you're looking at the problem from a very different perspective. I think it's partly because of your youth. And I think for us, it's more coming from the fact that it's where we grew up. It's what we've seen in our communities, and then mixing it with what we've seen in corporate and maybe the opportunities that we've had in terms of stepping out of the country. But your solution is uniquely African. And for me, it's really kind of just advocating to see more solutions like that are uniquely African, but as well still tapping into, I guess, the technologies of what exists out there.
Yeah, I think just a final question from me, just to maybe expand on the African point. What does your ideal Africa look like, or what does your ideal South Africa look like? So if you could build it yourself, overnight, like wave your wand, what would it look like and how would it operate?
So my ideal South Africa would look like this, is that we wouldn't have demarcations in terms of township and suburbs, right? We would have small towns, small villages that are integrated, that are run by the people. So I want to see more bakery stores rather than us buying from Albany bread. I want to see coffee shops. I want to see Black people owning stuff. I want to be able to walk in a store where Mrs. Mbata has made, the jeans that I'm wearing. That's the kind of not just South Africa, Africa that I'm looking forward to, that we can walk in and buy our indigenous food and not pay a premium. I mean, I walked into Pick and Pay and I'm doing about 46 Rand a kilo. Whereas, whereas I've always had my Dumbes for free in KZN. Like I've never gone and bought a Madumbe, right? But here in Joburg, it's 46 Rand at a Pick and Pay. And so for me, that's the vision. My vision is that every African kid, every African person believes that they are creators and that they can create and then learn how to monetize what they have created.
Yeah.
And for me, that's truly what I believe. And whether it's planting something, whether it's making something, whether it's being able to sell your music and your art, it's, for me, that's the vision that I have. And we have less monopolies.
Yeah.
And
so like
oligopolies.
decentralization. So decentralize everything and everyone must.
I think decentralize everything and really equal opportunity. I mean, I know it's idealistic, but KG, I think that's the only way we will solve the inequality issue in like on this continent. That we take back our power and realize that we are creators and we can make and we can add value. And for me, when we realize that, so many things can happen.
Thank you for listening. I hope the conversation inspired you to find African solutions to African problems. I am Kagiso Tlogwatla, aka African Investor, and you have just listened to one of Africa's critical thinkers.